Okay. Hello.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yay. Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes.
Amazing.
And I think that the stream can hear too. Uh, but if they don't, then they'll let me know.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. So you got people?
Yeah, I think so. A couple people.
Nice.
I leave the view count off, so I never know how many viewers are watching. Other than if obviously if people are in the chat, but um, yeah, I prefer to keep it off. I think it's
Cool.
easier.
Why? Can you say why?
Um, I think that I don't know. I guess if it's if it's a lower amount of people, or even I mean if it's zero people, then I think that it's hard for me to just talk to myself. Whereas
Okay. Fair
if
enough.
I don't know that there's zero people and I just pretend that someone's watching, then it's easier to talk. So if
Got it.
someone like, if the one person, let's say someone comes over from Kickstarter,
Hmm.
um, like I'm already talking about something, even if it's just to myself. I'm not just like quiet.
Okay. All right. So how's it been going?
I'm really tired. I did. I mean, this is only
Already.
yeah. It's only
Nice.
day two,
Yes.
and I didn't. And I think part of it too is I didn't sleep. Um, we finish
Mm.
at like 12, um, or whatever, and I tried to go to sleep, and I just could not go to sleep until like 3 a.m. or something.
Mm.
Um, and I think I was anxious, but I was just thinking like how I could make the stream better, and I
Hmm.
couldn't turn my brain off. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, so I need to figure out how to sleep and like shut my brain off
Hmm.
after I am done streaming for the day.
Hmm. Well, I think you know how we used to talk about like ways to give yourself time at other parts of the day to think.
Hmm.
So, but it's hard, right, to think about what you want to do while you're doing it.
Hmm.
Is that
Yeah.
fair to say?
Yeah.
So, can you give yourself like a 12 to 1, like a mental like okay, so this is my thinking time and then set an alarm where and then at 1 begin to sort of force your brain to slow down or compartmentalize. We talked about those tricks about like how to compartmentalize your thinking, like imagine putting it in a room or in a box or in some way to be or to slow it down. Because sometimes it's about shutting it down.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's about slowing it down and then sort of turning it into something else so that you can get yourself into a more restful space.
Yeah, I think that's what I have to do. I mean, after I turn it off, I'm really, really tired. Um, and I think that that's sort of after I turn it off is kind of like the easiest part. And I think that I do stop thinking about it because I just don't want to. But
Mm-hmm.
then after that is when like I'll be like, okay, I could totally go to sleep right now. Like I'm exhausted, so I lay down to go to sleep, and that's when I can't stop thinking about like tomorrow and what I'm gonna do next and who I
Mm-hmm.
all the things I need to do next.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, and I'm also taking my ADD med later, right? Too.
Well,
So
that okay. So, hmm. So does could that have something to do with your sleep cycle? Because the later you take it, obviously, the more difficult that could be. That could ultimately contribute to not being able to fall asleep.
yeah,
You
I
got
think
to
it
time
definitely
it just
does.
right.
Yeah, I think that adds to it. I think the caffeine adds to it.
Hmm.
Um,
Do you have a cutoff time? So I'm the kind of person who, like, so right now it whatever time it is. I know that there's a certain time of day. Like I can't have caffeine past 4. So, and if I do, I know I'm not sleeping. So,
mhm.
do you have an awareness of like, as far as caffeine is concerned, I would pay attention to that. Is there a time of day where maybe you should switch to something else?
Yes, but like when it's like 9 p.m. or like 8
Mm-hmm.
p.m. and I'm completely exhausted from streaming for 8 hours,
Mm-hmm.
then I just use the excuse that like, okay, I'll just have more caffeine. When usually I would not
Mm.
have caffeine past like 5.
So then here's the question. So this experience this, that we're in, like in this moment,
Mm.
what does it feel like? What's the difference between, or can you imagine getting to a place where knowing that you're streaming, it just is what it is, and it's just like breathing, and it's just living your life, versus feeling like you have to put on a show or engage the audience? What's the balance point here from this experience, would you say?
Yeah, if I can get to that point, that would be great. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's just always on and I don't think
Mm-hmm.
about it.
Right.
And I think that the only way that will happen is if I do it enough times, you know?
Well,
So
I was
like,
going to say, it's right now too. You're in that place where it's so exciting and it's new, and you
mhm.
might be revving for a while based on the newness of it. And then at some point, you might hit a dip in there where it starts to feel less new, less energizing, and more sort of more normal.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. I think what I'm most worried about is that it's just going to get harder. Like,
Mm.
either two things are going to happen. Either I'm going to stream for a week and it'll be really hard for the first week and then it'll get easier,
Hmm.
or it'll continuously get harder.
Okay.
And
So
if it
what's hard?
continuously
Yeah.
gets harder, then I have to make a new decision of like, okay, something has to change, you know?
That's so interesting. So, what if you got feedback? So, that's where this is going to be an interesting exercise in, whatever feedback is given and however that changes your creative process.
Mhm.
It'll be really interesting to see how the feedback changes things in terms of your mental health. And sort of at the end of the day, if you have to make a choice, if the fans are watching and they want more and they want you to sort of push yourself more and harder, at what point do you say, I hear you guys, but I really need to take care of myself? And I think that's going to be, an interesting tipping point one way or the other.
I think that everyone watching would be like everyone who's watched so far, I sort of know or know someone that knows them,
Uh huh.
and a couple people outside of that. But I don't think that anyone would be like upset if I needed to change things or stream less. I think
Hmm.
that they would maybe even encourage it. So
Hmm. Nice.
I don't know.
Okay.
I think it's more just about like what I have set out to do, you know?
Hmm. Okay.
More so
Which
than
is
what other people care about.
fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. So the experiment then is less about how you're interacting with the people who are watching and more about your own idea of what this experience is supposed to be.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So what do you think is hard? What's been hard?
Um, I don't know. It hasn't. I don't. I
Or
think
tiring?
that.
Like, is it hard or is it just energetically draining?
Yeah, it's like mentally draining. I think that the toughest part is when I have to work on something outside of burger bait that I need to do no matter
Hmm.
what.
Hmm.
With Creative 7 and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Because there's no way for me to make that interesting. Like I feel like, if I'm making like an ad for Burger Bait or something like a funny ad, then I can just
Hmm.
be making that and um, showing the stream what I'm doing,
Hmm.
and it's interesting. I feel like I don't have to add a lot to that.
Hmm.
But if it's something like something outside of this project that I can't stream, it's really difficult to focus on what I'm doing and to make it good, and
Hmm.
also, uh, per, you know, uh, I don't know what the word is, like, uh, entertain the stream, not entertain the stream,
Yeah,
but just
yeah.
be mindful that it's there.
Engaging. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think that it's interesting because you think about like being on versus being off, because we talked about this the other day. What does it feel like to be on and what does that mean? And I think that is about like an energetic, like I'm in my office and I can feel the difference of like when I'm quote unquote on, when I'm activated, when I'm engaged or engaging versus when I'm just like I have my feet up and I'm, eating a snack and drinking my coffee before 4.
Hmm.
So for you, like, that's actually an interesting way to regulate, like, or like different degrees of on, I think is what you're going to have to figure out is like, a red, yellow, green kind of thing, at least where I'm either off, I'm on full blast, or like maybe like a gear shift. Can you be on, in a way that doesn't feel so taxing? And I think that's something that you're going to need to play around with, almost like as if you had a dial and you could calibrate the intensity of your engagement. I think that's something that might be important.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I have to figure out how to do that and figure out what that is. Um, But yeah, I'm really hoping that as time goes on, it's a lot easier to just realize that no one can be entertaining for 12 hours a day, and
Yeah.
the point is really just to have the live stream running, not
Okay.
necessarily to you know make it like this entertaining thing, just to
Right. To be
sort of
consistently entertaining.
yeah, it's just to document what's going on,
Okay. Okay.
but it's difficult still.
Sure. Sure. I mean, it has only been a day.
Hmm.
Are you open to feel like, is this something where you would ask the stream, the people, by the way, I'm old. What do you call the people who are watching? Do you call them streamers, or are they fans, or are
I
they
guess viewers.
viewers? There you
Mm.
go. Okay. So would you ever ask for feedback from the viewers? Like, what do you want to see more of? What do you want to see less of? Or does that defeat the purpose of it just being an experience of them observing? Is it interactive, or is it observation?
That's a good question. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I definitely want to interact with anyone watching, and take their opinion and what they want into account as well.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think once there's an increase in viewers, if there's a some sort of increase, even to like 20, 30, 40 people or something, um, I think that will come into play a lot more as well. Uh, but I want to get to the point where I'm just documenting this process as
Hmm.
accurately as I can, not necessarily in an entertaining way.
Hmm.
And I just have to do like the mental switch that is
Hmm.
that. And once I get that, I think it'll be so much easier.
Okay. But again, is it one switch, or is it
A
either
dial,
on or
yeah.
off? Right, exactly. Or is there some degree, or like, it doesn't have to necessarily, if sometimes if people use the idea of a dial, then there's like too many choices. There's option paralysis there versus like low, medium, and high, so whether or not you look at it as a dial or sort of like a multi-switch, but some way to visualize, like, shifting up or shifting. Actually, there are some days too where, like, when I come into the office, I remember one of the best sort of pieces of advice I had ever gotten as a therapist is that sometimes you just need to show up.
Yeah.
And I go through periods where, like, if I have like a migraine or there's a lot going on, and I always want to come in. I'm lucky, I do something I love, and so it's never about not wanting to come in. It's about how much energy I have to really fully engage in the way that I usually do. So I've also had to kind of like regulate the intensity and my speed. And so there were some periods of time, especially in the winter when I'm not feeling 100%, where I will have to like channel that and be like, I just need to show up. And just by showing up, I'm doing something, and I have to sort of convince myself that just being in the room is enough. Um, and so it also can be something like that, where you're just supposed to show up. You're just supposed to be at the computer at baseline. And then anything after that is just kind of adding to what is already sort of not the gift, but was already the point, whether it's a therapy or this live stream, is like, you just need to be in the room right now.
Yeah.
And then anything on top of that is gravy.
Yeah, that's what I want to get to. And I think when you're mentioning a dial, I think that it's sort of a combination between a dial and a switch, because if I can get to that point where the baseline is just showing up, then that's like the switch is pretty much off. If I can just show
Yeah.
up, then that's great. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
everything after that is the dial.
Yeah, good. There you go. So there's the off, and then there's on, and then once you're on, then it's like an amp
Yeah.
where you can go up or down.
Yeah. And do you have any suggestions of things that I can do after I'm done streaming for the day, of um, being able to sleep afterwards? I know you mentioned one thing, but is there any other things?
Let's see. Actually, I'm so this is now, I need a second. I just got a text from a client, and I'm trying to, who's a little bit of a crisis. So this is my work, is I have to shift my brain can talk in 45 minutes. Okay, and I'm gonna put this away.
That's
So
me
yes.
this entire stream is like I'll be doing some like I can't focus on one thing, so I'll be like, all right, we're about to do this, and then I'll completely forget about it and start doing something else. And that must
Oh.
be like horrible to watch. 'Cause it's like constant cliffhangers.
Right, or entertaining, but that's entertaining, right? So it's interesting because also, so my job is to like be fully present, like for example, for a client, right? So in some ways, when I multitask, I'm doing a tremendous disservice. Whereas like it's not, it's not appropriate really. It's part of like whenever I meet a new client, I let them know, like, sometimes I'll get a text, I give them the heads up. And at the end of the day, if this were an actual session and we were sort of, this should be your time, it's really not appropriate for me to necessarily like multitask. Whereas if you're multitasking or getting distracted, that's kind of entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, at least I hope so, right? I hope that it's entertaining in some way. I really do think that if I can figure out how to um, get enough rest, then
Hmm.
I think that other things will sort of fall into place, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
So yes, it does. All right. So I can answer that one, which is so I started thinking about this for myself and then I translated it to my daughter. So I'm going to translate it here, which is I also too sometimes can't sleep because I'm in my head, or we're human beings. So I use myself as an example a lot, which not all therapists do, but I do when I think it'll be helpful. So here I am saying that when and what used to happen or what does happen is that when you can't sleep, you get anxious about the fact that you can't sleep. Is that true? Is that fair?
Yes, that's
Okay.
very fair.
Right. And then you're like, oh my God, how much time is it? So one day I tricked myself, and you have to be willing to trick yourself. Although I don't know if this is a trick, which is at the end of the day, I do believe that what your body needs is rest.
Hmm.
Okay. So what I started to do is think about, okay, even though my brain's awake, I just need to rest my body. I just need to rest my body. And what that did actually was that took the anxiety out of the not being able to sleep, and I almost settled in. I'm like, okay, then I can keep my brain up. That's fine. But then because I'm not anxious, I actually got tired. And it
Hmm.
helps me. It helps me fall asleep. And my daughter, who is 14, um, who, she's going through being 14, also said that she found that helpful, that there's something about giving yourself permission. And then I would say, too, to her, you know, so, all right, if you don't fall asleep, maybe tomorrow you can take a nap. And again, like in your case, hey, maybe you can live stream an app. This is your process. But I think that it's to remind ourselves that even though people say that a 24-hour day is a construct, right? It's a
Hmm.
construct. It's a human construct. I mean, yes, there's sun and there's the way that the earth moves around, and there's sort of like markers in the universe that tell us that time moves forward. But the actual, like a clock, what time we're supposed to go to bed, what time we're supposed to wake up, that's all a construct. So what I try to do is I kind of expand the idea of time, which is, all right, so if I don't get a full night's sleep tonight, maybe tomorrow I can take a nap, or maybe the next day I'll sleep more. So just to take the pressure off of, oh my God, if I don't fall asleep, I'm going to be a mess tomorrow.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that does make sense.
So
Um,
it's like a mental game, but I think that what keeps us up is our anxiety about being up. And it's just like like with panic, when people have panic attacks, a lot of times a panic attack comes on because you're afraid of having a panic attack.
mm,
So
that's
the
true.
anticipation of, and we've talked about like anticipatory anxiety, when you're worried about something that's about to happen, that becomes its own mental state. It's not even about the thing anymore. It's about the anticipation of the thing or fear of the thing. So I think that for a lot of us, not being able to fall asleep creates anxiety about not being able to fall asleep because we project how we're going to feel the next day.
Right, yeah. Yeah, because I'm worried about not only am I thinking about what I need to do on stream next, but I'm also worried that I'm going to be exhausted. So, how am I supposed to get anything done, you know?
Right. So then you have to say, so I think that then it's like, all right, so if I'm exhausted, I'm exhausted. And I think that that's the bigger issue is like, I do believe that like a lot of our feelings are wrapped up in our anxiety about how we're going to do it or not doing it right or not doing, but let's imagine if we took the anxiety out of this whole thing and you just, you were thinking excitedly about what you're going to do the next day, but it didn't matter whether or not you got enough sleep because you were just going to rest your body. And I do believe there's science about that. And that if you didn't rest your brain, okay, at least your body's rested. So you can put in a little bit of work. But then the other side is, okay, so what if you're tired the next day? Because here's the thing. If you're truly just live streaming life is you have days you can sleep, you have days you can't sleep. There's a holistic like mindset that it's important for you to take, not only like because you should on a mental health, whatever, but for the sake of this exercise, your goal is to have people see life in all of its colors, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a day where you're going to be cranky and you're going to not want to do it. And you're going to log on and be like, oh, I hate this. Or you're going to be like, hey guys, this is awesome. Whatever it is, I encourage you to be real, right? That was the whole kind of like idea behind this, was to be real. So real people get moody, get cranky, don't sleep, aren't at their best. So I think that if you take the worry out, if you take that part where you feel like you have to be entertaining, or you take out the part where you feel like you're supposed to go to sleep now, and you just kind of go with the flow, I think that it'll give you the ultimate experience of this live stream that you were hoping for anyway, which is to be a human being. And I think people benefit from seeing other human beings. And that's what I learned too as a therapist, is that I used to think that my job was to be all like, well, of course you want to be professional, but be sort of tucked in and, give the appearance. And a lot of therapists are like this. I have a client who refers to other therapists as pod people. He said that he had a friend who said their therapist, they think, just goes into a pod at night and then regenerates and comes back and nothing has changed. Don't be a pod person. That's something that I think is not realistic. It doesn't make other people comfortable. The more human you can be, or as a live streamer, the more human I can be as a therapist, it disarms people. It makes people more comfortable, and you become more relatable. Once you're relatable, you can have impact. In my case, if I'm relatable, I can perhaps affect a positive change. If you're relatable, people are going to want to buy into this experience of joining you in your process. So I think that it fits not just from a mental health standpoint, but if your goal is to get people to engage with you on this journey, then the best thing you can do is just be you, be a human you who's okay to be human you. Because that's the real, challenge in life, is to be okay to be imperfect and sloppy and tired and cranky and all the things that we are.
Yeah. I think I have to balance that and also looking like someone who, will be able to follow through with this project and make it happen. You know what I mean?
Yes. But I think that is, and again, like as an old person, I can say that what I have learned in life is that the one doesn't necessarily negate the other. And I'll tell you, I had a psychiatrist that I work with who also happened to be a friend of my family's. And so I had an interesting, and then we began to work together professionally, but he had seen me at barbecues and being kind of silly and fun. And so off hours, I'm ridiculous. On hours, I'm kind of ridiculous too, but it's a little different. And I remember needing to justify that to him. So when we first started working together, I said, just so you know, I'm not always silly. Like I wanted to justify myself as being a competent, capable person, because I was afraid that he would judge me based on my sort of, hanging out with the boys kind of persona. And he looked at me like I was crazy. He said, A, I never would think that. And B, I don't think that I know your work. I know, I've seen you. And also I see kind of basically like I see all of you. So sometimes I feel like you also never know how people see you. So I felt like maybe he only sees me as this sort of like silly person, but there were other things that got communicated along the way, to say nothing of sort of how I handled myself professionally. So again, if you are live streaming your whole self, they're going to see all of it. And
Mm-hmm.
the messaging that we can't be messy and imperfect and also be capable, that's the problem, I think, of like humanity right now. And I find that what if you can be both? Because that's the one thing that I think as a therapist that I do strive to do, and as a human I do strive to do, is that I can be really silly and playful, and I can also like pull it together and be spot on when I need to.
Mm-hmm.
But that is something that you don't always have the opportunity for people to see both sides, but in your case you will. So the hope is that eventually those two things will balance out, that those things will balance out. I know that about you. I've seen that about you. So my guess would be that they will too. But if we can't be all of ourselves, then I think that's when we start to not feel well emotionally, when we cut off certain parts of ourselves in order to impress or act or be a certain way that feels consistently, that starts to feel unnatural, i.e. if you have to be on all the time. You just start to not feel well.
Yeah, I think if I am trying to be on all the time, but it negates the purpose of, a lot of the project.
Exactly. So what's the purpose of the project?
Um, well, I think it is there's different purposes, I think, but in this purpose, it's sort of to immerse myself into this world, but also just document what it's like. Document, like, what's the process of live streaming yourself while you're trying to make a movie.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
So is it though, but again, is it to be consistently entertaining,
No.
or is it to be like a human being?
Yeah, it's just supposed to be real. It's supposed to be honest.
Okay.
So I guess that's the purpose.
Mm-hmm. Good. I would almost like want you to write that down and on a sticky, all about the stickies, and or somewhere, and put it on your monitor or
Okay.
on your desk. And in fact, that's actually a good idea. And we can build on it where whenever there's some, sometimes we say things and we're like, oh, that's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
I do it all. It would be great if you could kind of create like a board, like not a mood, like a mood board or like a therapy board, but an affirmation board or something that just kind of reminds you why you're doing the project or what's important, so that if you start to kind of question, should I be doing more? Should I be doing less? I would love you to put up there, sometimes you just need to show up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think I just need to get to that point. And like the sooner the better.
Okay, but remember that you just started.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
I guess the question is, what are some of the things that you think in general? So let's take it to a larger conversation, which is, in general, we as human beings have a hard time just being,
Mm-hmm.
and do in general feel like we need to be entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's a metaphor for how I think sometimes people do move through the world. So then the question is, why do we think that is? And what mental process forces us, puts us in that box, and how do we get out of it? Like what do we say to ourselves, or what do we believe about how other people perceive us that makes us feel like that's what we have to do, that we have to rise up or level up or be a certain way?
Yeah, well, everyone kind of wants to be liked, right? And that's just
Mm-hmm.
due to human evolution, I guess, of like humans were safer and more effective in not only in pairs but in groups of people.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So like from a sociological standpoint.
Yeah, so like humans are probably wired to want to be liked by other people. Um,
That's interesting.
I mean, I don't know. I'm just
No,
guessing,
that's
but
interesting.
so I think trying to be on and trying to be entertaining is trying to be liked.
Okay. Okay. Because so then if you put that to like, so it's interesting because on the one hand, if to be in pairs and to hunt in pairs and to be social beings, it's like I don't care if you like me as long as you work with me.
Mm-hmm.
So to put that in the context of like is interesting. So what does it mean to be liked versus someone who can just like collaborate, do something to get a partner? You know, do you have to like your partner? Necessarily not like a romantic partner, but like if you're working with somebody, if we're really talking about people who need to pair up in order to like accomplish a goal or achieve something, is that necessarily the same thing as like?
No. Uh, yeah. So why do people want to be liked?
You tell me. What do you think, first of all?
Um, I don't know.
Okay, well, I do think that that is like a human need. It's a human need, I think. Look, like kind of like what you were saying, what we're wired as is social beings.
Mm-hmm.
And we're wired, I think, and okay, so let's look at it this way. So I always say this, like whether it's a baby or a bird or a goat, organisms are brought into this world,
Mm-hmm.
and they seek things like uh, food and shelter and attention, right? Or and in order to and love, they seek to be validated. See, that's what's interesting is that in early childhood studies, a child who is effectively mirrored
Mm-hmm.
by a parent very, very early on. By mirrored, I mean like they feel seen, they get their needs met, they will develop a healthy sense of self or self-worth. So I do think that you're right, that we do crave that and we do need that in order to feel good about ourselves.
Yeah. So we want to be liked to feel good about ourselves.
Yes. But then here's the question. But then at some point, and it's one thing to have being liked be a measure of our worth sort of when we're younger, when we are developing our senses of selves. We need that reinforcement and that validation, and that's pretty critical, whether it's from family or parents or friends. And if we don't get it, that's how we kind of get thrown off our trajectory, and a lot of insecurity and things that kind of develop out of that. But as an adult, how we use validation is very different, because if you enter into a situation, and very, by the way, very few people have had such a wonderful, it's more, we talk about sort of the ideal when we're talking about psychology, and we're like, in a perfect world, these are the things that happen.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing is that the benchmark, and I want to use this language here, the benchmark for basic psychology is good enough. Do you have a good enough situation so that you are, whether it be like comfortable or content or like kind of like this baseline feeling of, okay, versus what does it mean to thrive or to like feel something more than just I exist, therefore I am.
Right.
Right? Okay. So I think that in early childhood and early development, if you're lucky enough to have the good enough, then you feel good enough about yourself. And once you become an adult and you start to contribute, or even like in school and you start to do stuff and you get validated for what you do,
Mm-hmm.
then you feel even better about yourself, right? That's going to enhance your self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, if growing up they got no validation, and on the flip side, or even worse than that, negative feedback about their personhood, they need validation in order to feel worthy of anything as adults.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just I need to feel a little bit better about myself. It's I need to know that I am like worthy of being in this world, because at the core, that ideology is less solid than perhaps in someone who grew up in a space where they felt validated constantly all the time, both at home and let's say at school or with their friends.
Mm-hmm.
So the role validation plays ultimately has as much to do with, we all know it makes you feel good, like there's no question there, but how important it is, where it lives, whether or not some people feel this like endless need to be validated
Mm-hmm.
for everything. And some people feel like they just want to be validated, like in your case, like you're doing this project and you're taking a risk. And it's very reasonable and appropriate and normal for you to need some degree of validation in order to continue going on with this project because it's your project, it's new, it's your creation. And so whether or not you come into this with a clear sense of self-worth, on top of that, you are putting a part of yourself out into the world. So of course you're going to need some validation.
Is there a scenario where I can do this and not need validation?
This, which is the this, like
The
life or
no,
this
no, no.
project.
The just the next 29 days.
What do you think?
I don't know. I think that that would be the best place to get to, right?
Right. But I don't know that, I mean, that would be this, like, I keep thinking about like a sensory deprivation chamber
Mm-hmm.
where people without input from the world go crazy.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that it's reasonable and needing validation by the people always think that needing validation is a bad thing. No, it's part of the human experiment. And I think that yes, ideally, God, ideally we could all just like exist and not care what other people think. But of course we do. And also to remember the meta of this experience is that you cannot separate yourself from the fact that the are we, by the way, so I need to know this. Are we talking about the movie or are we not talking about the movie, the IRL filmmaking experience?
Yeah, we can talk about the movie.
Okay. So for for Travis,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of we talked about how you doing this live stream, how is this going to be similar or different from Travis's experience with a live stream,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in theory, and correct me if I'm wrong, Travis is actively interacting, even though he doesn't know like how where it's going to go. You don't turn on you don't turn on a live stream necessarily unless you are will open to engaging in feedback.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay. So in Travis's case, that's kind of, we're talking almost entirely about, not entirely, but very at the nut of this piece is about that interaction between him and the feedback.
Right.
Okay. So how can we can't entirely separate out that experience from what you're doing
Mm-hmm.
from a human level, right? You're still live streaming, right? So, and even though you are, saying or not feeling necessary that you're going to jump through hoops the way Travis does with his, viewers. But once we open ourselves up to getting information from other people, we feel it. It's like, it's human nature. It's stimulus response, my friend. It's programming. We receive data and feedback the same way a computer does. You can't deny that. So there's no way, and anybody who says they can do this, I challenge them, which is there is no way to receive data, to receive a piece of stimulus and not have a response. The question is, what do you do with that response? And the response is always a feeling first, and then it's a thought. Right. And then it's a behavior. Yeah. So there's no way to not feel it. I don't care what anybody says. I highly doubt, unless people are, there are people who are sociopathic, who don't feel. But for most people, you're going to feel because you're a human being. And I have clients who say, I hate feelings. Well, then you hate being a human being because we're stuck with them.
Right. Yeah.
It's what we do with them. Go ahead.
Silas said, I think you have to define the terms of the validation. Does the funding validate you, a bunch of casual supporters, or a few hardcore supporters?
Ooh, good one.
I'd like to just, in an unrealistic world, I'd like to not need any validation. from
Hmm.
anyone else and just do it.
Hmm. Sure.
Because I think that that would be the most honest portrayal of what I'm trying to do. But
Okay.
I think what would most validate me is not even the funding, just um, having people interested in the project, and as that number increases, I would be more validated. So I think it comes down to numbers of the amount of people um, interested in it, and I think that that would validate it being the project being interesting to a wider audience of people.
Okay.
Because I think that would also mean that I would relate to a bigger audience of people, and they would relate to me.
So then we go back to what's the point of what you're doing? What's your motivation? Is it, or can I ask another question though?
Mm-hmm.
Can it be that we need different things for different reasons? Like we are one person, right? But there are different parts of our ego, right? Like there's the intellectual side, and then there's the creative side, and then there's the money side, right? So I think that, you or the fight or the fact that, to be fair, you absolutely, this what you're doing here with live stream is, it's fundraising. We're fundraising. That's
Yeah.
how I see it.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a fundraising endeavor. And so the validation in this case, it's monetized, right?
Yeah.
But we don't want to always, and that sort of is one of those things that kind of feels a little funny, right? Because you're like, well, but it is, it's sort of reinforcement of your project, belief in your project, confidence in the project. So for all those reasons, that kind of validates the project, right?
Yes. I think even doing this is sort of validating the project. Like I have a lot of validation already, enough to do the project.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it's just like, I don't know, like would I even turn on a live stream if someone didn't, if I didn't need validation of some sort, even if it's a little tiny bit. Like does
Right.
anyone ever turn on a live stream who doesn't need any validation, you know?
Exactly, 100%. Because otherwise, then then you do something else. Or but here's the other thing too, as artists, and this is one of the things that we always struggle with, which is, people always say, like in theater, when I was a theater person, it was so obvious, like that what we were doing was for attention because we put on a show, right? However, when I went to grad school for drama therapy, and I went in as a therapist who wanted to use drama as a tool, I had a really interesting flip where I realized that what I was doing with theater, I didn't want the attention, but I wanted to understand how I could heal people through this modality, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's what you do with the thing. Again, like, are you using your power for good instead of evil? Or are you, entertainment by default
Mm-hmm.
is is attention grabbing,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we cannot divest ourselves from the reality that we are somehow inherently, even whether it's as human beings or not, but whatever side of the entertainment creative world you're in, there is some degree of attention need that exists in that, or else you go work in a bookstore, or not even you work, because then you're selling it, but you work somewhere where it doesn't matter what other people think or feel about what you're doing.
Mm. I think honestly, I don't really want the attention. Um, and if I could just have someone else sitting in this chair right now and live
Mm-hmm.
streaming themselves for 12 hours a day, I would
Mm-hmm.
prefer that and be able to watch them to see what happens. I think I'm
Okay.
more interested in the overall idea than being the subject, but I don't think that I could find anyone to convince them to be
Huh.
live stream for 12 hours a day. But
Fair enough.
so I
But I
want to
think you
know
want,
what happens enough to put myself here.
interesting. But you want the attention, but you want your project to get attention.
Yes.
And then the question becomes, and from my perspective as a creative art therapist, can you separate the two? How can you separate? And this is the argument, that tale as old as time. When someone's creating something, are they creating an extension of themselves, or are they creating something wholly outside of themselves? And there are two schools of thought on that.
Okay, what are they?
Well, the one is that my thinking, again as a creative therapist, is that everything you create is an extension of yourself. it's a
Yeah.
form of expression.
Mm-hmm.
But some people, some artists believe that they can create something that's completely outside of themselves. It's objective. A lot of painters and some writers. I mean, artists in general. I bet you anything. You can ask your streamers. Like streamers
Viewers,
might
yeah.
be half and half,
Or baiters.
but it depends on how your orientation on that. But if you want the attention for your project, can you separate that out from the attention on you? And I don't know. I don't know the answer. I think it's
I think
something
no.
people wrestle with.
I
Right.
think no. Because I mean, I'm the face of it.
Exactly.
If I could have a mascot for this project who's not me, I would much prefer that. But
What
that's
would
not
it be?
realistic.
Oh, wait. What would it be? Because I can tell you, I had an idea, which is that I think you need to pick a mascot. Maybe have your streamers help you, and then you need to get a stuffed representation of it and put it in the chair when you need a break. Because that's what I've been wanting you to do, is have something for people to look at if you need to go take a break.
That's a really good idea.
Maybe so. I'm not even going to make suggestions. You have to generate that on your own.
Yeah. That's
I
a
would
really good.
love that.
I'll see if there are people who have any suggestions for what the mascot can be. But that would be great, I think.
Yeah, good. And that, by the way, so in like the creative art therapy world, that's a projective object.
Mm-hmm.
That is an object that represents a part of yourself that, and in many ways, I think that actually might be really good for the therapy, because this way, I think that will, like, you can even deflect. If you're feeling pressure, you deflect some of it onto the mascot. And the mascot represents this creative project, so that if Chris needs to step away, you can. And you could even step away sitting in your own chair. You just put that in front of you. And that might help with the energy drain. That might be the battery pack.
Yeah, that would help a lot.
Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna do that.
That's the droid we've been looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, because that'll help me. Because then I can recharge and also keep the same purpose of having the constant live stream. So, like, I can still respond to people who have questions through the chat, even if I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sitting in this chair for
Exactly.
maybe like 30 minutes or whatever,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Absolutely. I thought of that the other day. I was doing a Zoom call from my house, and I left and came back, and my dog was sitting in my chair. I was like, yeah. So it was funny, and B, I was like, it might be just to have something in that chair, and be able to have the viewers see something that represents, and then it does, again, it allows you to,
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit. Hold on.
even that idea, right? You leave the stuffy. Oh, whoops.
What were we? Go back a little bit. What were you saying?
Okay, where you even like with the sleep,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where maybe you put the stuffy to sleep, right? Or maybe you leave him in the chair to whatever. I think that we can use this to help in some way with the boundaries of where your energy is.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think loosening the like rigid rules that I've set for myself would help things a lot in that way.
Definitely.
And doing
So
it in
what
a
kind-
creative
yeah.
way.
Absolutely. Is there any other way?
Yeah.
What are some other, what are some other boundaries or hard rules that you set for yourself that maybe we can kind of, with our last couple of minutes, play around with?
Well, just in my mind, I sort of, thought, okay, I have to be live streaming myself. The camera has to be on me 12 hours a day. And even when I like switch over from my desktop to my phone, I'm like, technically I'm not live streaming myself right now. I need to turn the camera back on. And it's just too much pressure. So I think what you're saying is great. And then also coming up with other creative ways. Like there are ways where, I could even play like the documentary I made of when I made Tethered. Like I could play that movie for an hour and a half, and people could watch that on live stream, and I could take a break for a second,
Right. You can also ask other folks to contribute. Anything that they would want to have screened or streamed. I was just like, you can do a puppet show. Like you can do all sorts of things to fill in the time.
Yeah,
because
and
it
I
does.
also have people like what like Silas just mentioned in the chat, and Carly also said before you said that your dog was your mascot for a second. She said that she wanted her dog to be the mascot of the stream.
Oh,
So,
oh, that's
um,
so fun. Oh, no, it has to be mine. Just kidding. No, yeah.
she
What
she
kind of
called
dog does
that.
she have?
I don't know what
She's
kind of
gonna
dog
want.
she
Does she want to
is.
fight me? Because
She
I'll fight her.
yeah, she probably would. She's like 4 feet tall. She
Um, I'm to my 5 feet, so it would
yeah,
be a close fight.
yeah, it would be a good fight.
All
But
right, I can
she
do that.
like apparently oh, it's a golden retriever. Apparently she like spends way too much money on her dog. But
Oh,
Silas just mentioned yeah, that he's gonna be visiting sometime. So yeah, I think people coming and visiting um and hanging out will help a ton too. But
definitely.
until then, all of that will be later in the month. So
Hmm.
until then, I need to like implement these things that you're saying of like,
Definitely. I would
yeah,
get so delirious. I was just thinking, like, I keep feeling like you should get a puppet.
yeah. I mean,
I
I'm
totally
gonna go
think it.
crazy
Do you
anyways doing
know?
this.
Listen, do you know that there's a person who makes Sesame Street puppets that look like the people? Or you can go online and find like puppet makers that will make a person represented puppet or get a puppet of your mascot.
I should do that.
Do you want to hear something crazy? My mother back in the 50s was a ventriloquist. I
Really?
swear to God, on a television on a television show. Not even lying.
That's
And
insane.
I know. And it was a show called Star Time, and nobody can find it. So I mean, I've tried,
Hmm.
but and what happened was, and this is very interesting, is that she was set to go on the Ed Sullivan Show one
Hmm.
night, and she got bullied at school because she was in middle school. People would make fun of her because they thought that she thought she was all that because she was on television.
She got on the
And
show in middle school.
no, she didn't go because what
Oh.
happened? She was on a different show with Sherry Lewis. She was on a
Oh.
show called Star Time. Actually, she was
Hmm.
on a show called Star Time with Sherry Lewis, who does lamb chop.
Hmm.
And the funny thing is that, and I'll never do it, but I have for some reason I think it's genetic that you can do the ventriloquism because I can do it. It's very weird. But anyway, that's for another show. But anyway, another time I mean. But she was getting bullied, and she decided she came home from school one day and she said to her parents, "I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to be a regular kid."
Mm.
And turned down the offer to be on the show. But talk about validation because her father was her manager, and he was all in on her, being on her fame, and took it very, very seriously. And that actually caused a rift in their relationship. And so her sense of validation, she spent a lot of time being validated for her performance.
Hmm.
And when she wasn't doing that anymore, her dad turned his attention away from her, and that created what was referred to as a narcissistic injury when a parent or a loved one or anybody. So and how that ties into what you're doing is, of course, you're an adult and it isn't your parent. But the interesting thing too is, like, okay, so when we get validation for the things that we're doing, right, what happens when we're no longer doing the thing, and how do we feel when that validation, whether it's a parent or a friend, and obviously the stakes are much higher when it's a parent, but how do we feel when that validation is no longer available to us?
Hmm.
And is it just a aw shucks? Or again, back to that, like those earlier questions about like ego and sense of self, you can imagine in a younger person, even like a middle schooler, to have that kind of rejection or withdrawal of validation once you're no longer doing a thing creates a fracture in your own sense of self-worth. So wait, so was it just the thing I was doing that was worthy of love and validation, or was it me as a person?
Yeah, I think that definitely happens to me. Like if I'm not working on something for a long time, that must be part of the reason why I get so down.
Sure. But that's also different also too, or yes, and the yes and I will say is that you're a creative person. I'm a creative person. You're engaged with creative people. I believe as a creative therapist that people who are creative need to create,
Hmm.
and that gives them a sense of wellness, right?
Hmm.
Psychological wellness, whether they're being validated or not. And I find that when people don't have access to their art, which I've shared with you before. And another time I'll talk about sort of my story
Mm-hmm.
about, when I didn't have access to my ability to be creative was the first time I experienced what I would guess refer to as like a mental breakdown. Because what I came to understand is that my ability to be creative and have a creative outlet was my therapy, was my oxygen, was my lifeline.
Mm.
So for people, and it wasn't even about the need to be validated; it was about the need to express myself through my
Right.
creativity.
Right. Yeah.
So so then that's that separation of like, did I really need to be validated, or was it also not so much that it was that I needed the outlet? It wasn't about what I was doing; it was about the fact that I was doing it.
Mm.
Because I too did not like the attention. I hated it. And so once I realized it was just about being able to be creative, and then I had to figure out how to take that impulse and put it into something that felt more comfortable for me, which for me was therapy.
Mm. Right.
And
Yeah.
for you, like you said, if you're going outside of your comfort zone for the sake of the project, right? That's a labor of love. It's
Yeah.
not something that, but how we kind of collectively address the day in day out of how this project makes you feel about yourself. That's where we're going to have to be kind of mindful of, as all artists we must be. But if you're going to be doing this every day, the where and whether, we have to build kind of this buffer around your ego, around your sense of self, which again is, I think, where the mascot comes in, where you can just kind of like put this thing out and step back when you need to, so you can check in with yourself.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really, really good idea. I'm glad you gave me that. That's really good.
Cool. Okay, well, I'll be looking forward to hearing what said mascot is,
Okay.
and then people can send you like people can send you puppets. It's got to be a puppet. I mean, it can also be a stuffed doll, but
I'll see
got to
what I
be
can find. I'll see what I
okay.
can
You
find.
do that. All right. Okay, so I'm going to sign off for today.
Okay.
All right, but very cool, very exciting project, and keep doing your thing. Just self-care, my friend.
Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. It gives me
You
a
betcha.
nice break too, which is nice.
Cool. Okay. My pleasure. My pleasure.
All
All
right.
right. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
All right. What do you guys think of that?